The blood-red sunset painted the distant mountains as Eleanor Abigail Garland stumbled across the harsh desert landscape, her once fine dress torn and dusty, her face streaked with tears that had long since dried in the merciless heat. The year was 1878, and the Arizona Territory showed no kindness to a woman traveling alone. Eleanor's boots, not meant for such terrain, had worn through at the soles. Her fingers bled where she'd gripped rock faces to climb. 3 days without proper water had left her lips cracked and her throat raw. But still, she pushed forward, because behind her lay only death and sorrow. The small mining town of Copper Creek appeared like a mirage on the horizon, a cluster of wooden buildings shimmering in the heat. Eleanor blinked, afraid it would vanish, but the town remained, growing more substantial with each painful step. By the time she reached the edge of the settlement, the last light was fading from the sky. The town's saloon stood as the only building still fully illuminated, piano music and raucous laughter spilling from its swinging doors. Eleanor hesitated, knowing a respectable woman had no business entering such an establishment. But respectability had ceased to matter when her family's wagon had been attacked 2 weeks prior. She pushed through the doors, instantly assaulted by the stench of whiskey, sweat, and tobacco smoke. The piano player stopped mid-note. Conversations halted. All eyes turned to the bedraggled woman standing in the doorway. "I need." Eleanor's voice cracked, barely audible. She swayed on her feet, vision darkening at the edges. "Help!" A tall figure moved from the bar, crossing the room in long strides. As consciousness slipped away, Eleanor felt strong arms catch her before she hit the floor. When she awoke, it was to the gentle touch of a damp cloth against her forehead. The room was simple but clean, a far cry from the opulent Boston home she'd left behind months ago. A man sat beside the bed, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the lamplight. "You're awake," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Thought we'd lost you there for a spell." Eleanor tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her with weakness. "Easy now," the man cautioned. "Doc says you're suffering from heat exhaustion and dehydration." "Where am I?" Eleanor managed to whisper. "My room's above the general store. Name's Gabe Bronson. Most folks call me Gabe." He leaned forward, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, a striking shade of green, regarded her with concern. "Eleanor Garland," she replied automatically, years of proper Boston upbringing impossible to shake even now. "Well, Miss Garland, you gave us quite a scare. Care to tell me what brings a lady like yourself to Copper Creek, half dead from the desert?" The events of the past weeks crashed over Eleanor in a devastating wave. The hopeful journey west with her family, the attack by bandits, her father's futile attempt to protect them, her mother's screams. Her younger brother's still body. "I've lost everyone," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes once more. Gabe Bronson's expression softened. He reached out, his calloused hand covering hers with surprising gentleness. "Then you found me just in time," he said softly. Eleanor stared at him, this stranger offering comfort so freely. In Boston, men of society hid their emotions behind proper decorum, but there was something in Gabe's direct gaze that spoke of honesty and perhaps a man who understood loss himself. "Rest now," he continued, standing and adjusting the blanket around her. "We'll talk more when you're stronger." For the first time since the attack, Eleanor felt the faintest spark of hope as she drifted back to sleep. The next few days passed in a blur of recovery. Eleanor learned that Gabe owned not only the general store below, but also served as the town's unofficial lawman when needed. Copper Creek was too small for a proper sheriff, situated as it was between larger settlements. On the 4th morning, Eleanor felt strong enough to rise from bed. She found a simple dress laid out, modest but clean. "Mrs. Wilson from the boarding house brought it over," Gabe explained when she emerged from the small adjoining room. "Figured you might want something other than—" He gestured vaguely to her tattered traveling dress. "Thank you," Eleanor said, smoothing the unfamiliar fabric. The dress was plain compared to her Boston wardrobe, but such finery seemed from another lifetime now. "Mr. Bronson, I cannot impose upon your hospitality much longer." "Gabe," he corrected, "and it's no imposition. Town doesn't get many visitors, especially not ones who need help." Eleanor's gaze dropped to her hands. I have nothing to offer in return. The bandits took everything, our money, our belongings, even the wagon after. She stopped, unable to complete the sentence. You don't owe me anything, Gabe said firmly. But if you're set on earning your keep, Mrs. Wilson mentioned needing help at the boarding house, and I could use someone with a neat hand to help with the store ledgers. Hope mingled with uncertainty in Eleanor's heart. You would do that for a stranger? Gabe's mouth quirked in a half-smile that transformed his solemn face. Like I said, when you arrived, you found me just in time. He hesitated before adding, I lost my wife and daughter to fever 3 years back, been running the store alone since then. I know something about starting over when there's nothing left. The simple confession created an immediate bond between them, the shared understanding of devastating loss. Thank you, Eleanor said softly. I would be grateful for the opportunity. That afternoon, Gabe showed Eleanor around the general store. It was well stocked for such a small town, carrying everything from tools to fabric, canned goods to ammunition. The ledger system, however, was in disarray. Never was one for numbers, Gabe admitted sheepishly as Eleanor flipped through the chaotic pages. I can help with this, she assured him. Her father, a successful merchant in Boston, had taught her bookkeeping from a young age, believing an educated daughter was an asset. The memory brought both pain and comfort. Using his teachings felt like keeping a part of him alive. As days turned to weeks, Eleanor settled into a routine in Copper Creek. She divided her time between organizing Gabe's accounts and helping Mrs. Wilson at the boarding house. The townsfolk, initially curious about the refined Eastern woman in their midst, gradually accepted her presence. Gabe proved to be a man of few words but constant thoughtfulness. He ensured Eleanor had everything she needed without making her feel like a charity case. Each evening, they shared simple meals above the store, their conversations growing longer as Eleanor's grief began to ease enough to allow other emotions. One evening, as summer faded into early autumn, Gabe returned from a supply run to the larger town of Prescott with something tucked under his arm. Thought you might like this, he said, presenting Eleanor with a book, a collection of poetry by Emily Dickinson. Eleanor's fingers trembled as she took the volume. How did you know? She whispered. Gabe shrugged, looking suddenly uncertain. You mentioned once that you missed your books, saw this at the booksellers in Prescott, and remembered. The simple gesture broke something inside Eleanor. The kindness of it, the fact that he had listened and remembered such a small detail, overwhelmed her. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. I'm sorry, Gabe said, immediately alarmed. I didn't mean to upset you. No, Eleanor managed through her tears. It's just... No one has given me a gift since. She clutched the book to her chest. Thank you. That night marked a turning point. As they sat by the stove, Eleanor read aloud from her new book, her voice gaining strength with each verse. Gabe listened intently, his green eyes reflecting the flickering lamplight. You read beautifully, he said when she finally closed the book. Makes me see the words differently, hearing them in your voice. Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the stove's heat. For the first time since arriving in Copper Creek, she found herself truly noticing Gabe as a man, the strong line of his jaw, the way his shirt stretched across broad shoulders, the gentleness in hands that could break a wild horse. My mother loved poetry, she said, pushing away the unfamiliar feelings. She would read to us every evening. Tell me about them, Gabe said softly. Your family, if you want to. Until now, Eleanor had avoided speaking of her lost loved ones, the pain too raw. But something in Gabe's gentle request made her want to share. My father was a merchant in Boston, she began hesitantly. He built his business from nothing. My mother came from money, but she married him for love against her family's wishes. The words came easier as she continued, describing her scholarly father, her elegant mother, her mischievous younger brother. They wanted to start fresh in California, she explained. The business was struggling after the financial panic. Father thought the opportunities in the West would save us. A bitter laugh escaped her. Instead, it killed them. What happened? Gabe asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor closed her eyes, the memories she'd been avoiding rushing back. We were attacked 3 days out from Tucson. 6 men. Father tried to fight them off, but... Her voice broke. They shot him first, then Mother when she screamed. My brother, he was only 15, tried to protect me. They killed him too. Her hands were shaking now. They would have killed me as well, but one of them, their leader, decided I might be useful later. They tied me up in the back of our own wagon while they took everything of value. Gabe's face had hardened, his jaw clenched tight. That night I managed to work free of the ropes, Eleanor continued. When they were drunk around the fire, I ran. I ran until my feet bled, hiding during the day, moving at night. I was lost for days before I found Copper Creek. The silence hung heavy between them. Then, with deliberate gentleness, Gabe reached across the table and took her hand in his. You survived, he said simply. That takes more courage than most men I know possess. In his eyes, Eleanor saw not pity but profound respect. It was perhaps the greatest gift anyone had given her, seeing her strength rather than her loss. That night, Eleanor dreamt not of the attack but of green eyes and gentle hands. As autumn progressed, Eleanor found herself looking forward to the evenings with Gabe more than anything else. During the days, she had transformed his chaotic bookkeeping into an organized system, even identifying several customers who had outstanding debts to the store. The boarding house work provided additional income, allowing her to save a small amount each week. Mrs. Wilson says you're a godsend, Gabe remarked one evening as they walked back from the boarding house. The sunset painted the dusty street in gold, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage. Says you've got the place running smoother than it has in years. Eleanor smiled, pleased by the praise. She's a kind woman. Everyone here has been kind. Folk here understand hardship, Gabe replied. Most came to start over for one reason or another, like you. Eleanor asked, realizing she knew little about his life before Copper Creek. Gabe nodded slowly. I was a Union soldier during the war, came west afterward, couldn't settle back into normal life back east, too many ghosts. He paused before continuing. Met my wife here. Sarah was the daughter of the man who owned this store before me. Our daughter, Lily, was born a year later. The tenderness in his voice when he spoke their names made Eleanor's heart ache for him. The fever came through town 5 summers ago, he continued, his voice growing distant. Took half the town. Sarah and Lily were gone within days of each other. Eleanor stopped walking, turning to face him. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. I'm sorry, Gabe, his fingers tightened around hers. For a long time I thought I'd died with them, he admitted. Just hadn't stopped breathing yet. And now, Eleanor asked softly, his eyes met hers, intense in the fading light. Now I'm remembering what it means to live again. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibility. Then the church bell rang out, breaking the spell. They continued walking, but their hands remained linked until they reached the store. That night, Eleanor lay awake in her small room, her thoughts in turmoil. She had come to Copper Creek with nothing, expecting nothing. Now she found herself caring deeply for this quiet, honorable man. But with those feelings came fear. Everyone she had ever loved had been taken from her. Could she risk her heart again? The answer came to her as she drifted toward sleep. She already had. The next morning brought unexpected news. A rider arrived from Prescott with word that the territorial marshal had captured a gang of bandits operating near Tucson. The description matched those who had attacked Eleanor's family. They're being held in Prescott for trial, Gabe told her, his expression serious. The marshal wants to know if you'd be willing to testify against them. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. The prospect of facing her family's killers terrified her, but the opportunity for justice burned stronger. I'll go, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I have to. Gabe nodded, his jaw set in determination. I'll take you. It's a 2-day ride. 2 days later, they set out for Prescott. Eleanor rode a gentle mare borrowed from Mrs. Wilson, while Gabe led the way on his stallion. The journey gave them hours of conversation, deepening their connection as they traveled through the rugged landscape. Gabe proved to be a patient teacher, showing Eleanor how to ride properly, how to read the terrain, what plants were safe to eat if necessary. His knowledge of survival in this harsh land impressed her, so different from the skills valued in Boston society. They camped beneath the stars, a small fire between them. As Eleanor gazed upward at the vast canopy of lights, she felt simultaneously insignificant and deeply alive. I never saw stars like this in Boston, she murmured. The city lights dim them. That's one thing I love about this country, Gabe replied, his face illuminated by the firelight. Makes a man feel both small and part of something greater all at once. Do you ever miss the East? Eleanor asked. Gabe considered the question. Sometimes I miss the conveniences, theaters, restaurants, but I could never go back to living so close to other people with all those rules about who you ought to be. Eleanor understood. Already, the rigid social constraints of Boston society felt like a distant memory. Here, she was valued for her competence rather than her family connections or ability to navigate complex social hierarchies. "What will you do after the trial?" Gabe asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Will you continue to California as your family planned?" The question caught Eleanor by surprise. She had been so focused on surviving day to day that she hadn't considered her future beyond Copper Creek. "I don't know," she admitted. "There's nothing waiting for me in California. No family, no connections. And in Copper Creek," Gabe's question hung in the night air between them. Eleanor met his gaze across the fire. "In Copper Creek there's possibility." Gabe's smile was brief but genuine. "That's a good word for it." They reached Prescott the following afternoon. The territorial capital was significantly larger than Copper Creek, with proper streets, government buildings, and businesses. After securing rooms at a hotel separate but adjacent, with Gabe insisting on propriety, they reported to the marshal's office. Marshal James Harker was a stern-faced man with a silver-streaked beard and the weathered look of someone who had spent decades upholding the law in unforgiving territory. "Miss Garland," he greeted Eleanor formally, "I understand you had an encounter with the Sutton gang." "If that's what they call themselves," Eleanor replied, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. "Vicious bunch," the marshal confirmed. "Been terrorizing travelers and isolated settlements from here to New Mexico for 2 years. Your identification would help ensure they hang for their crimes." Gabe, sitting beside Eleanor, placed his hand supportively on her shoulder. "She'll need to see them to confirm," the marshal nodded grimly. "We'll arrange it for tomorrow. They're being held at the jailhouse. You can observe them without being seen." That night, nightmares plagued Eleanor's sleep. She woke shortly after midnight, gasping for breath, the memory of her family's screams echoing in her mind. A soft knock at her door startled her further. "Eleanor." Gabe's voice came through the door, concerned. "Are you all right? I heard a cry." She opened the door, not caring about propriety. Gabe stood in the hallway in his shirt sleeves, clearly having risen from bed at her distress. "Nightmares," she explained shakily. Without hesitation, Gabe guided her to sit in the room's single chair. He knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. "You're safe," he assured her. "I won't let anything happen to you." "It's not that," Eleanor whispered. "It's seeing them again, hearing my testimony send them to death. I want justice, but taking a life, even through the law, is a heavy burden," Gabe finished for her. "I know, the war taught me that." "Does it make me weak?" she asked. "To feel conflicted?" "No," Gabe said firmly. "It makes you human, the best kind of human." His certainty calmed her. They talked quietly until her trembling subsided, Gabe sharing stories of his time as a soldier, of the men he'd fought alongside, of the complicated feelings that came with survival when others had fallen. "Thank you," Eleanor said as dawn's light began to filter through the curtains. "For understanding." Gabe's hand moved to cup her cheek, a touch so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. "Get some rest. I'll be with you every step today." The identification process was mercifully brief. From behind a one-way glass, Eleanor observed as 5 men were brought into a room one by one. Her breath caught when the 4th man entered, a tall figure with a distinctive scar crossing his right eyebrow. "That's him," she said, her voice tight. "The leader, the one who—" She couldn't finish. Gabe's hand found hers, squeezing reassuringly. "And the others?" Marshal Harker prompted gently. Eleanor identified 2 more of her attackers with certainty. The remaining men she couldn't positively recognize, though one seemed familiar. 3 positive identifications is more than enough," the marshal assured her. "The trial is set for next week, but you won't need to attend unless you wish to. Your sworn statement will suffice." Relief washed over Eleanor. "Then we can return to Copper Creek tomorrow," Gabe confirmed. That evening, to celebrate the identification and to ease Eleanor's lingering distress, Gabe suggested dinner at Prescott's finest restaurant. Eleanor hesitated, aware that her simple dress was hardly suitable for such an establishment. "I have nothing to wear," she admitted. "Let me worry about that," Gabe replied with a mysterious smile. An hour later, a package arrived at Eleanor's door, a dress of deep blue silk, modest yet elegant, with a matching shawl and simple pearl earrings. "Gabe," she breathed when she opened it. "How did you?" I asked the hotel clerk's wife for assistance, he explained, looking pleased with her reaction. "Is it suitable?" "It's beautiful," Eleanor whispered, touching the fabric reverently. It had been so long since she'd worn anything fine. "Thank you." When she emerged from her room that evening, Gabe was waiting in the hotel lobby. He'd somehow acquired a proper suit, and the transformation from frontier storekeeper to gentleman was striking. His eyes widened appreciatively as Eleanor descended the stairs. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The restaurant was indeed grand by territorial standards, with white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and a small ensemble playing violin and piano in the corner. As they were seated, Eleanor felt a momentary pang of self-consciousness. This setting reminded her of Boston, of a life she'd lost. But Gabe's presence anchored her to the present. His attentiveness, his quiet confidence, the way his eyes never strayed from her face when she spoke, these things belonged to her new life, not the old. "I've been thinking," Gabe said as they enjoyed their dessert, "about what you said regarding possibilities in Copper Creek." Leanor's heart quickened. "Yes, the store is doing better since you organized the books. People like you, Mrs. Wilson says you've brought new life to the boarding house." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a place for you in Copper Creek, a permanent one if you want it." Before Eleanor could respond, Gabe reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "I'd be honored if you'd consider becoming my wife." Eleanor's breath caught. The proposal was unexpected yet somehow exactly right. In the month since her arrival in Copper Creek, Gabe had become her anchor, her friend, and increasingly the person who made her heart race with a glance. "I know it's sudden," Gabe continued, misinterpreting her silence. "And I understand if you need time. We've both lost so much." "Yes," Eleanor said softly. Gabe looked confused. "Yes, you need time." A smile bloomed on Eleanor's face, the first truly unreserved smile since the tragedy. "Yes, I'll marry you, Gabriel Bronson." Joy transformed Gabe's features. With slightly trembling hands, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as though made for her. "I can't promise an easy life," he said seriously. "The territory is still wild, unpredictable." "I don't want easy," Eleanor replied. "I want real, I want you." They returned to Copper Creek 3 days later, the journey back filled with plans and dreams. The town's reaction to their engagement was universally positive. Eleanor had become one of their own in the months since her arrival, and Gabe was respected by all. Mrs. Wilson insisted on hosting a proper engagement dinner at the boarding house. "Been too long since this town had something joyful to celebrate," she declared. The wedding was set for spring, giving them time to prepare. Eleanor threw herself into making the store's living quarters more of a home, while Gabe began building additional furniture and expanding the bedroom to give them more space. As winter descended on the high desert, bringing cool days and cold nights, Eleanor found comfort in the routine she and Gabe established. They worked side by side in the store during the day, shared meals in the evening, and spent hours talking by the warmth of the stove. Word came in January that the Sutton gang had been convicted. 3 men, including the leader, were sentenced to hang. The others received lengthy prison terms. The news brought Eleanor a complicated mixture of relief, vindication, and sadness. That night, she wept in Gabe's arms, not for the condemned men, but for the finality of justice that still couldn't bring her family back. "It's over," Gabe murmured, stroking her hair. "You can truly begin again now," and she did. As winter gave way to spring, Eleanor found herself embracing her new life fully. She started a small reading circle for the town's children, teaching those whose families had no access to formal education. With Gabe's encouragement, she wrote to her father's attorney in Boston, learning that while most of the family assets had been lost in the financial panic, there remained a small inheritance once the debts were settled. "It's not much," she told Gabe as they read the letter together, "but enough to add that section of dry goods you've been wanting to stock." Gabe looked at her in surprise. "You'd invest your inheritance in the store," Eleanor smiled. "In our future," she corrected. "This is my home now, our home." The wedding took place on a perfect April morning, with the desert in rare bloom after winter rains. The small church was filled with everyone from Copper Creek and neighboring settlements. Eleanor wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Wilson and the other women had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. When Gabe saw her walking toward him down the church's center aisle, the naked emotion on his face made Eleanor's heart soar. This strong, gentle, honorable man loved her completely. "I never expected to find love again," Gabe said later that night as they stood on the balcony of their home, looking out at the star-filled sky. "Thought that part of my life was over." Eleanor leaned against his solid warmth. "When I stumbled into Copper Creek that day, I had nothing left. No family, no hope, no future." "I remember," Gabe murmured, his arms tightening around her waist. "You said you'd lost everyone. And you said I'd found you just in time," Eleanor finished, turning in his embrace to face him. "You were right. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Gabe corrected, before lowering his lips to hers in a kiss that spoke of promises kept and a future bright with possibility. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. A drought threatened the region's cattle ranches, bringing economic hardship to Copper Creek. Gabe and Eleanor extended credit to struggling families at the store, earning deeper respect from the community. Eleanor's reading circle expanded into a proper school, with the town providing an abandoned building for classes. Her students ranged from young children to adults eager to improve their literacy. In the fall, Eleanor discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled Gabe with equal parts joy and fear. The memory of losing his first wife and daughter still haunted him. "I can't lose you too," he confessed one night, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "You won't," Eleanor promised, though she knew such things couldn't truly be guaranteed in a land where medical care was limited. "We're stronger together, remember?" As her pregnancy progressed, the town rallied around them. Mrs. Wilson shared her knowledge of midwifery, while the women who had successfully borne children in Copper Creek offered practical advice. Gabe insisted on hiring additional help in the store so Eleanor could rest more. Their son was born on a crisp autumn morning, with Mrs. Wilson assisting and Gabe pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door. When finally allowed to enter, Gabe's face reflected wonder and love as he gazed at his wife and newborn son. "He's perfect," he whispered, carefully taking the tiny bundle into his arms. "What shall we name him?" Eleanor smiled tiredly. "I was thinking Thomas after my father, Thomas Gabriel Bronson." Tears glistened in Gabe's eyes. "Thomas it is." As Thomas grew, so did Copper Creek. The railroad extended a line within 20 miles of town, bringing increased trade and new settlers. Gabe and Eleanor expanded the store, adding a proper office for the bookkeeping that had become Eleanor's domain. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Eleanor gave birth to twin girls Sarah, named for Gabe's first wife, and Lily after the daughter he had lost. The gesture brought Gabe to tears when Eleanor suggested the names. "Are you certain?" he asked, clearly moved by the suggestion. "They were part of your life, part of what made you the man I love," Eleanor replied simply. "They should be honored." With 3 young children and a thriving business, life became beautifully chaotic. The living quarters above the store expanded again, with Gabe adding a second story to accommodate their growing family. On the 5th anniversary of her arrival in Copper Creek, Eleanor stood on the balcony of their home, watching the sunset paint the desert in the same blood-red hues she'd seen on that desperate day. Gabe joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured against her hair. "I was thinking about how much has changed," Eleanor replied. 5 years ago today, I stumbled into town with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart full of grief." Gabe's arms tightened around her. "I remember. You fainted right in the middle of the saloon, scared 10 years off my life," Eleanor laughed softly. "And now look at us, 3 children, a thriving business, a real home. The best decision I ever made was carrying you up those stairs that day," Gabe said, turning her to face him. His face, still handsome though now showing signs of age and responsibility, held the same tenderness it had when he'd first told her she'd found him just in time. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stumbled into another town? or if you hadn't been in the saloon that evening. Eleanor asked. Gabe considered the question seriously. I believe some things are meant to be. Not everything we make our choices forge our paths, but sometimes two paths are destined to cross. From inside came the sound of their children's laughter as Mrs. Wilson, now a beloved grandmother figure to all the town's children, told them a story. I lost everyone I loved, Eleanor said softly. And somehow in that loss, I found more love than I ever imagined possible. And I found the strength to love again when I thought that part of me had died, Gabe replied. We saved each other, Eleanor, and we'll keep doing that every day for the rest of our lives. As the last light faded from the sky, they shared a kiss that held the promise of all the years to come, years filled with the challenges of the frontier, the joy of watching their children grow, and the deep, abiding love that had brought healing to two broken hearts. Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Eleanor took out the journal she had kept since arriving in Copper Creek. In it, she had recorded everything: her grief, her healing, her growing love for Gabe, the births of their children, the development of the town. On this anniversary, she wrote, 5 years ago, I believed I had lost everything worth living for. I was wrong. Life had not ended, it was waiting to begin anew. In the moment when I said, I've lost everyone, and Gabe replied, then you found me just in time, our story was already written in the stars above this desert. What appeared to be an ending was merely the first words of a much greater tale, one of healing, hope, and a love strong enough to rebuild two shattered hearts into something beautiful and whole. She closed the journal and placed it in the drawer of the desk Gabe had built for her. Through the window, the desert night sparkled with stars, a reminder of how far she had come from that desperate day. In the next room, Gabe waited for her, as he had every night since she had stumbled into his life, steady, loving, the foundation upon which she had rebuilt her world. Eleanor smiled as she went to join him, grateful for the twisted path of fate that had led her to lose everything only to find everything that truly mattered.